Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. And just to bring it home for no disclosures, just to bring it home for what we've already said, we are all products of the biodesign program at Stanford. There is a textbook that is used. Innovation is really something that is a skill. And like all skills, you can be taught how to do that skill. But fair warning, we all drink the Kool-Aid here with any biodesign. And so this concept of the need, it's so important because we actually spend, it's a one-year fellowship when we're doing this training, and we spend half of the year just focused on what the need is. And so the need kind of goes back to this idea, the question is like, okay, well, is the idea, is it the thing, what is it? Something to keep in mind is kind of a background in this, that an invention is not the same thing as innovation. And so innovation is really that idea that's put into practice, that has all of the work, all of the other puzzle pieces that need to be there in order to get everything into practice. The work, the capital, and the pursuit that gets from an idea to something that is actually used on patients. Surgeons, as we are at this meeting, we're doers. And so you have a problem, and it's not 5 seconds later before you have 5 different things. Oh, I can do it this way, I can do it that way, I can do it that way. But for this, we really need to put a pause, because we always tend to jump to solutions first. And so we need to take a pause and really understand all aspects of the need before we then go in and figure out kind of how to fix the problem. There's this imbalance where kind of, again, our tendency is to go technology first. You have a technology and then you end up trying to shop around for something. Oh, where can I use this idea, this technology? So the biodesign process really talks about how really defining the need and having that then to pull to further characterize, further design, so we get a good aspect of the technology. And Josh Macker, who's our current chair, or what is he, program director, chief something, chief of the biodesign program and one of the founders. What is it? King. But he has this saying, a well-characterized need is the DNA of a great invention. And so most of the time, these comes with observations and identifying needs. This is the key to identifying them. And so when you're operating, when you're seeing patients, whatever you're doing, just be cautious. So patients like, oh, that's just the way it's done. Question the dogma. Pay attention to when you're feeling viscerally frustrated about something not working, or you're noticing people in the other areas to where they're frustrated. And that observation can then lead to identifying what we refer to as a need. How we define a need is it's kind of composed of 3 situations, but it really identifies and then characterizes real clinical challenges and problems that impose a burden on our system in some way. A need consists of 3 components: the problem, what is actually going on, the population, or who it impacts, and the outcome of what are you measuring, what are you trying to change with your solution to this. These 3 elements come together as a needs statement. And so a needs statement is a way to address a problem in a population that has some outcome. So an example of this is, say, a way to address catheter-associated UTIs in ICU patients to minimize ICU stay. It's just an example, and again, everything I'm telling you, it's further in detail in the textbook, okay? After we've identified a preliminary need where you've kind of gone through, you've really defined, it's good to kind of take a pause, take a step back, and do something we call needs scoping. This is where we go up and down to be able to optimize our needs statement, to really capture everything that we're doing. We try to broaden and narrow the program, and so you can scale up for a patient. Okay, are we talking about all patients? All patients with catheters, patients with kind of chronic indwelling catheters. And we can kind of scope up and down for all 3 of those aspects of the needs statement. Is there a subset of the population that may be more relevant? Is there a low-hanging fruit that could be your 2 market strategy? Is the outcome the most important one? What do payers care about? What do physicians care about? What do patients care about? All these things are really important questions, and kind of the initial scoping of this tells you kind of where we go for kind of each step. After you have a needs statement, then the work comes in. It's not just, okay, this very simple thing, high five, we're done. We spend a lot of time, and this is a big part of it, is characterizing the need. This is where you truly understand all aspects around what the need are. And it really depends on these 4 key components. One is understanding the disease state fundamentals. We as doctors tend to be pretty good at this. However, we are also prone to implicit bias because, again, we listen to what our attending told us, and that's the way it's done. We have to know the landscape of existing solutions. What's out there? What's wrong with it? We have to do a very thorough stakeholder analysis. Whose hand is in the pot? If we change this, how does it impact something down the line? And then we also have to know the market analysis to then choose, again, are these needs pursuing? So to go into these a little bit more in depth, talking about disease state fundamentals. Again, in surgery, or as doctors, we tend to be pretty comfortable with this part. So we talk about the epidemiology of disease. How is the anatomy and physiology? What about the pathophysiology? How well is it understood? What is the clinical presentation of patients? What are the clinical outcomes we care about? And then this one maybe we don't always think about, but what's the economic impact of this kind of disease state? Landscaping out existing solutions. We need to kind of think about all of the different kind of aspects of care around there. We care about diagnostics, behavioral and lifestyle treatments, pharmacologic or biologic treatments, percutaneous treatments, minimally invasive treatments, open surgery, and then services. And all these are potential solutions for problems. And so we need to make sure that we kind of go through and we really know what the landscape of what's already there and then why it works and why it doesn't work. Also disease management. And in that, then, we start to identify gaps. And this is where we have these gaps in our desired outcomes with actual outcomes, and then what we've been able to achieve with existing solutions, but then it also helps us find where there's opportunity. We can look for gaps in specific subsegments of patients' needs. This is, again, we're scoping your problems. And you continue, it's a continuous process. It's not like you did one thing, check mark, you're done. You're always going back and revisiting and thinking about all aspects of these cares. Cost is another thing. Value is a huge push for value in our healthcare system right now. But if you can find a gap, then, hey, that might be an opportunity. Looking at the existing solutions, you have an overview of what they are. This is kind of like give you a little bit more structure of how do you analyze these, how do you do? And so an overview to first start is just very broad, very easy, but you can see it and you can that way kind of reference back to it to see, okay, I need to dive in a little bit more. I need to understand this aspect a little bit better. And so overview, broad overview is good, but then you can look at a clinical solution profile. This looks at the clinical reasons for why things are done, what mechanisms there are, clinical evidence, indications, is like you can look for, consensus statements or treatment guidelines, things. That's kind of where you get the clinical portion of that. And then also there's the economic solution profile. What's covered? What are people willing to pay for out of pocket? What's the value? How do you determine the value of something? And then also a utilization solution profile is another kind of characterization of how each solution is used, when is it used, where is it used, by whom is it used, all these things. So something that, a cardiologist is like, yeah, that's what we do 100% of the time, versus a cardiac surgeon might be doing something a little bit different, versus a cardiologist, a non-interventional cardiologist may be doing something different. So all of these things and really understanding the landmark of it and kind of what is available, again, helps you understand to find and identify gaps. And then the emerging solution profiles. This can be tricky to find because you don't always know what's in the pipeline, what's going in, but there's always, if you kind of talk to people, know the right ideas, you can figure out where, what's coming in. So it's really important to understand what's in the pipeline, what is coming in, and you really need to understand what the next 3 to 10 years in whatever field you're looking in is going to be, because you would hate to spend a lot of capital, both time, financial, intellectual capital, all of these things, and then find out 2 years in, 3 years in, gosh, someone had something in the works and they're going to beat you to market. Going from existing solutions, we talk about stakeholder analysis. This is really identifying and understanding everyone who has their hand in the pot for the needs. And so this can be patients, patient families, advocacy groups, doctors, different types of doctors, professional societies, nurses. You can read the rest of them here. But everyone has a hand in it, and some may be more important than others. If you're going to a direct-to-market, the patient and what they're willing to pay for out of pocket is. If you're going through something that needs a PDA 510 or PDA FDA approval, and it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to pay for, then you got to really understand what your reimbursement profile is. So you need to really understand all of these stakeholder analyses to be able to go through. And ways to help identify these, there's a couple ways. One of them is to follow the patient. We look at the cycle of care. And so you follow the patient from starting to have symptoms, what's their workup, what imaging do they need to do, what kind of diagnostics do they need to do, what is the initial treatment, what's the next step, what's if they fail, Who's involved with all these? Is it an ambulatory center? Where is the care done? All of these things impact and or have a hand in the pot for whether stakeholders. The other way to do this is to follow the money. Who pays for it? How do they pay for it? Is insurance involved? Is it cash pay? And so those give you a way to exhaustively identify all the stakeholders, and because sometimes one stakeholder, if they've got an iron grip on something, you need to convince them to be able to feasibly get your things to market. And then last, market analysis. For me, this was a little bit fuzzy for kind of when I first came in. This was my weakest thing as a doctor for sure. But you need to know it, and it is so darn important. And we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but you need to at least identify the market landscape. Good way to do is kind of look at total spending in the need area. You can do kind of top-down or bottom-up calculations of knowing kind of what is there. If you have this great idea that fixes this problem, but only 100 people a year have that problem, it's going to be really hard to make it financially make sense to get a product to the market. You can divide the market in certain ways. You can look at subgroups. You can add layers of complexity as over multiple things. And then I work on identifying your target market. And there are really good frameworks that, again, the book kind of goes in a little bit more, but for at least me as a doctor, this is where I tag a teammate and have a friend really help kind of with this stuff. I don't know, how are we doing on time? That's kind of right on time for me. And I'm just going to kind of briefly touch on, so that's a basic overview of the need. Again, the need is really characterizing the nail so that way you can design the perfect hammer to get the nail. Just to go over the biodesign program in general, it's kind of 3 stages. We call it identify, invent, and implement then. And again, half the year we spend is on identifying and really deeply characterizing those needs. And then it's not until we have the need defined that we then go on to the next step. I'm going to stop there. Any questions?
I think what we'll do is we'll get all the presenters up at the end, and then we'll have some time for a panel discussion. You can ask all the questions at that.
Perfect. Sounds good. All right. So then I have the joy of getting to introduce our next speaker. So we have Nick Princey, who is an engineer and a surgeon, surgical resident at Georgetown. Prior to residency, he spent several years in medical device technology development, and similar to me, is a former biodesign fellow. And he is here to talk to you about, that's one thing I didn't do is have the name of the talks. About IP, about intellectual property. All right, so we'll go ahead and welcome you up here.